Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody. I'm in New York at a hotel, as you can tell from the lovely, whatever this is behind me, decorative, I don't even know. It's crappy. But here I am. I'm here.
Is it the same hotel every time?
No. I like to keep, so that I can't be targeted by radical leftists. I like to move around in undisclosed locations. So I'm not in my normal spot. You can tell I've got, sometimes they'll be different. Sometimes you will see the same picture behind me. This could be a little game we play. Where's Waldo sort of thing.
I feel like you're basically an honorary New Yorker at this point.
People think it's funny because I've been coming this week. I'll be in New York 3 nights.
Right.
And normally it's 2 nights a week. But there are people who think I live in New York, and it's also weird. Like, there's a thing where you're sort of recognized by local, the guy at Starbucks, the gal behind the corner at the CVS, whatever, like where you're sort of part of a community. And, in a couple of neighborhoods, I sort of am like a local now.
So I feel like you should have your hangouts. You should know who works at the hotel. You should know who works at your local diner. Like you should have you should have a little alternative life for yourself.
We should do like a montage where like I'm walking down the street. Hey Bob, Susie, love that dress. How's little Kimmy doing at the new elementary school?
Because that's what New York City is like.
I'm picturing Cosmo Kramer, the street door. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. And I do have a second family up here, which is also nice. Who could do that? Isn't one enough? Come on.
What, Charles Lindbergh had 3.
Like on the sly?
He had 2 secret families in Europe that his wife didn't know about till he died.
It's a lot of work. I mean, there's a Family Ties episode. There's Mrs. Doubtfire, same sort of trope where, but the Family Ties episode where Alex has 2 prom dates,
right?
And he has running. I would run to the bathroom, and he would go hang out with the other one.
Was that what made you a Reagan Republican? Seeing how Alex Keaton stretched himself.
Well, I don't know if that episode specifically, but I would say that Alex P. Keaton, underrated for Republicans of a certain age, who, some people say it was like Red Dawn. I say no. Alex P. Keaton. And I almost put, there's a great line in there where there's an episode where where the Keaton family goes out of town and they leave Alex at home, and he decides, being an entrepreneur, to rent out the place. There's like a big Ohio State football game or something that weekend, and it turns into this huge party. It gets out of control, and they kidnap like a kangaroo or something from the opposing team's mascot, and then Michael Gross, Stephen Keaton, comes home and to find that like his house has like been taken over by, it was like before Airbnb, but somehow Alex P. Keaton, like, being a young entrepreneur, rented out their house when they went away on vacation. And the dad had a line where he said, there's certain things that a dad comes to expect when he comes home: spilled milk on the rug, broken dish. There was a kangaroo in my living room. And I almost used that with, I wrote a story about Donald Trump's kids, Don Jr. and Ivanka, and I almost threw that. It just didn't quite work because like nobody would get the reference except for like you and me. But anyway, big Alex P. Keaton fan. But I do not want to. But see, I don't think the effort of having multiple families. There's also an old country song. Maybe it's a country song, but it's trying to love 2 women is like a ball and chain. I just never mind 2 women. How about multiple kids that you have to like buy your birthday? Remember birthday? Come on. No way.
Well, we should probably get down to business. And when we last talked, I think you had the manometer was on Nixon following all the Trump Jr. Russian revelations. We've had more Russian revelations since we talked. but we've also had the demise of Obamacare repeal, which I know you were on CNN just a day or two ago talking about how you saw this coming. We talked about it on the show here. I also was on the same wavelength as you, that this was a dead end. And so do you have mixed feelings today, that you're sad that Obamacare is indestructible, or are you happy that your punditry has proven correct? What's your general how are you feeling inside right now?
I mean, I'm not upset, because I've come to terms. This isn't new. I was upset when Obamacare passed 10 years ago or whatever. I mean, yeah, there's a certain happiness when you get a column right, when your gut instinct about things are right. Look, I mean, I just think that basically, not to sort of rehash what we've said a million times, but once people buy into the concept that this is an entitlement, then rolling it back is incredibly hard. And the problem, I mean, the Republicans had a million problems, fundamental problems with doing this. But one of them was that the Republican plans were never really a free market, perfect sort of free market solution, And so if you're a conservative like a Ted Cruz or a Mike Lee, why would you support something that wasn't really going to get rid of the Obamacare architecture? And then on the other hand, if you're a moderate Republican, like in a tough district, why would you support something that isn't as compassionate or generous? So it just pleased nobody, right? It wasn't conservative enough to actually fix healthcare in a free market competitive direction, but yet it was less compassionate and less generous than Obamacare. So it was really the worst of both worlds. And then you take that and you sort of compound it with the fact that people are just sort of used to the current system. Anything that changes it for good or bad is going to be problematic because people just want stability. They want to figure out how this works, and they want us to quit messing around with it. And then you've got the fact that Trump, just basically outsourced this. It's not what he ran on. I mean, he sort of, he ran on repealing and replacing, but this wasn't exactly his. He doesn't even have a vision for what.
I mean, top three is build the wall, right. Make our allies pay for their defense, rip up the trade deals. That was the bigger stuff.
So it's just a mess. It's just a mess. And I said on CNN the other day, and very provocatively, as you have to be, I said that this was Trump's Vietnam. I got a little pushback for that, but the point that I was making obviously isn't that this is exactly like Vietnam, because it's completely different. But the similarities are that, number one, it's he inherited this. It wasn't really his thing. He thought he could just do it kind of quick, or it would be a side item, but it's potentially going to doom his entire domestic agenda. And it's a quagmire. You can't get out. It's always sunk costs, right? So you can't cut and run, but you can't win. It's an unwinnable war that you also can't cut and run. Republicans are still not ready to walk away from it. They're going to, because they've invested too much time into it. If you walk away now, then the last 6 months have been pointless, right? So they keep getting deeper and deeper into it, and they got nothing to show for it. And the other problem is, not only is there the sort of opportunity costs, what could they have been doing had they not been doing this, but the other problem is, Reagan passes tax cuts in '81 so that there's a stimulus effect essentially by the time he runs for re-election. Even if you assume that Donald Trump's, tax plans, would grow the economy, you have to actually pass them in time for a re-election. Well, it's going to be harder to pass anything, presumably, the closer we get to midterms, right? The easiest time it should have been to pass anything would have been like January, February, March, April. It's getting progressively harder. Anyway, I'll shut up. It's a disaster.
So, where do you think Republicans go from here? I have some thoughts where I think Democrats go from here.
Well,
but
let me just quickly say the Mattometer, right? You always ask about that.
Yeah.
So it's not feeling Nixon-y to me. I don't know. Is it LBJ? Is it Jimmy Carter? That's what this week felt like to me.
I mean, Jimmy Carter domestically came into office and put almost everything into having an energy strategy, and he got certain things passed over time. He created the energy department. There are a couple bills that finally got passed, but he never really got what he wanted, and it was a constant battle with Congress. His own party, bedeviled him, and it really drained a lot of his political capital, and it confused people because he didn't run on it, and he tried to galvanize the public through essentially fireside type chats, and he wasn't able to really rally the public behind his vision. So what we could have here is Republicans just can't let go. Well, we promised we'd do this. You even have Trump and Pence publicly shaming the congressional Republicans. These people said they were going to do this. They voted for repeal bills in the past, and now they have a chance to do it, and they won't do it, which is clearly not a helpful message going into the midterm. So they could run around in circles forever, or they could say, look, we just got to rip off the Band-Aid, Tell the public this is not happening right now. We got to move to tax reform. We got to move to a 2018 budget resolution so we can do tax reform, because that's how the reconciliation process works. It means we just can't do health care once we make that procedural move. And once we get that done or get something else done, then we can pat ourselves on the back. But let's not kid ourselves here.
There's a former. He was used to be a Democratic operative. He became kind of a Bush guy, but a guy named Brian Lundy that I know a little bit. His famous line that I always remember is, "Abandonment is the most underrated political weapon in America." Republicans, as I wrote in January, in hindsight, they would have been better off to just walk away from this. Right,
and you and I agree with that. But do you think that they have the wherewithal to do that now? Is the sense you've gotten the past 24, 48 hours that they are ready to say this is not happening?
No, this is partly this is a cycle. I mean, some of it is obviously like donors and campaign promises, but I think there's a psychological component here, which is like loss aversion and sunk costs, and they can't walk away. Remember, Paul Ryan, after the first time that health care bill goes down, Paul Ryan says, okay, Obamacare is the law of the land for the foreseeable future. Within hours, they were back on it, right? There's going to be talk about, so after the Senate bill went down, then there was talk about just a straight repeal. Now there's going to be talk about, let's just get rid of the individual mandate, or you know what I mean? This will not go, I don't know how long it's going to take before they give it up. And the problem is it actually is still possible that it's within the realm of possibility that they could pass something and declare victory, right? So that's always the temptation.
Well, you have Joe Manchin now, Democrat from West Virginia, running for re-election. This is the Trumpiest state in the country. But Manchin has always tried to present himself as a bipartisan problem solver that tried on gun control and fell short, even though they had a deal with Pat Toomey. Now he's saying, I want to get all the former governors who are now senators in both parties, they're about 5 in each, in a room. I think they actually met last night, although I haven't heard anything about what came of it, and see if they could do something together. And if it was going to be together, in all likelihood, it would probably be very small bore, tinkering around the edges, not getting rid of the mandate, not doing a massive overhaul. I doubt Manchin and others would get behind Medicaid cuts because it served that expansion serves their states very well. if that happened, would the Rand Pauls and the Mike Lees say, "Great, let's do it. Let's do what we can here"? Would McConnell even bring that to a vote if it was going to divide his caucus?
No. I mean,
so then, if you're not going to do that, I mean, there's no way you're doing anything that appeals to the Rand Paul side, because that's not going to get to 50 votes either.
I just don't know how you get anything that, at this point, that pleases on one hand like Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Mike Lee, and on the other hand like Collins, Heller, Portman, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, just use them as an example.
No,
I mean,
it strikes me as a square you can't circle, circle you can't square. But you're telling me that Republicans have an emotional need to keep pretending they can do this, but if anyone on this earth lacks any emotion, it's Mitch McConnell. Why would Mitch McConnell say, "Look, kids, we're here to get something done. This is not happening. Stop crying your beer and let's move on here"?
I mean, again, this is why I use the very, fraught with danger. I mean, I'm always reminded of this. Again, this is another analogy that's dangerous, but the Thomas Jefferson line about slavery, where he said something like, we've got a wolf by the ears and we can't hold on to him and we can't let go, And I use the Vietnam analogy, also fraught with danger. Like, you always think one more bombing campaign. They're just about ready to surrender, right? Let's give it one more try. And if we give up, think of all the sacrifices we've made to get to where we are. It'll be all for nothing. I mean, if Republicans give up on this, that is to concede that they have squandered 6 months and that they are going to not keep – that they voted multiple times to repeal and replace, and now they can't do it. It's an admission that they – psychologically, I don't think they want to come to terms with. And I think there's an argument for voting. I mean, there is an argument for voting for a straight repeal, right? So if you're Marco Rubio, let's say – now if you're Dean Heller, maybe this is a bad idea, or Portman. But if you're Marco Rubio, getting to vote for a straight repeal and having that vote go down in flames would actually be a good thing for you.
Well, I assume that's what McConnell wants to do. They're going to be a vote on motion to proceed. It's not the bill itself. By all accounts, that motion will fail because Collins and Murkowski and I think at least one other, I forget who, said they wouldn't go along. But if you're in a deep red state, you can say, I voted for repeal. I followed through on my pledge, and it's these bastards that didn't do their part. And if you're in a swing state, you can say, I'm an independent. I stood up to my party. I wasn't going to vote for something that was half baked and was going to take away health insurance from people. And not everybody wins, but that's maybe the best you can do considering the circumstances.
Yeah.
But we're already hearing some backlash against McConnell, someone who was built up as a modern master of the Senate for holding his caucus in line for so long in the Obama years, engineering the denial of Merrick Garland and getting Neil Gorsuch, a play everyone thought was ridiculous at the time, yet he pulled off the triple bank shot. And now people are saying you can't get your caucus to follow through on the most known pledge that your party's had for the last 7 years. Does that put his leadership position at risk? And if I can just add more onto that, we're heading into another government shutdown moment at the end of September. The debt ceiling is around the corner in probably mid-October. And you have people saying we're not going to vote for this unless we fund the wall. And obviously that's not going to pass muster with Democrats, and that would get filibustered. Are you going to have a situation where Paul Ryan is going to have to put something on the floor that doesn't have support of the majority of his caucus, which was what forced John Boehner to leave town. So both people potentially, Ryan and McConnell, having their leadership positions in a very tenuous place.
Yeah, a lot to chew on there. First, I guess there's always the question, like, should they be, we always said, like, should John Boehner basically say, okay, now I'm going to deal with Democrats, Mm-hmm. Instead of, like, part of the problem here is they've always been trying to do this via reconciliation. And the problem with reconciliation is that is not only is it the fact that you can't get, like, bipartisan buy-in, but as long as you honor there's an argument that you don't have to adhere to the Byrd rule and the reconciliation rules, that you could just overrule the parliamentarian. But as long as you're gonna play the game of adhering to it, you couldn't actually tackle the underlying architecture of Obamacare. Remember, Trump had the 3 tiers. The 3 tiers, like, one was like price, fixing things through regulatory changes to healthcare, and then one was the actual Republican bill, and then one was, then we're going to come back later after we get like 60 senators and do more. So one argument is that McConnell and Ryan should not have been trying to make a dramatic change to 1/6 of the U.S. economy via party line vote, via reconciliation, right? I think that the big failure here, and Mitch McConnell, I mean, I don't know that he's like a policy wonk per se, like in the sense that Paul Ryan is. He's seen as more of like a wheeler and dealer kind of, whip kind of guy. And so to me, the big fault here is with Republicans who failed to actually have a viable and coherent healthcare replace alternative. So I don't know that we can blame McConnell for that. He's not a magician, okay? He was trying to get Republicans to vote for a bad bill that didn't please anybody, and he failed at that. But I don't personally see that as I do not blame Mitch McConnell for that. He couldn't get them to eat dog food, and it's a hard sales job to get people to do. I do fault Republicans in general for not having, for giving them, for feeding them dog food. But I don't know that McConnell solely deserves blame for that either.
Now, I had a tweet storm the night that the replacement bill clearly was going down, where I basically argued, this should be a teachable moment for Republicans. You didn't take policy seriously. This sort of going on the thesis of Too Dumb to Fail, your book. You've
available in paperback as we speak.
You've campaigned and won on grievance. That might be fine for winning elections, but it's not sufficient for governing. You'd have actual policies. You need to work through difficult challenges and trade-offs. If when you get in power, you're unable to do anything, you're not going to hold power for very long. So you wasted 7 years not working through these problems. You try to do it on the back of a napkin, and it didn't work.
But I think
are they going to internalize that? Okay, this is big boy, big girl politics time. It's time to actually get serious about the policy details. And whereas Trump, and this is the tweets of Trump is like your ne'er-do-well high school friend who always wants to go drinking and not study for the test, and he's always there saying, "Yeah, you don't got to worry about that. Don't do that nerdy stuff. Let's just go punch the media and we'll go party with Putin and drink some vodka and have a good time." Are they going to realize that that's not a sustainable strategy over the long term?
Well, but I was even, look, okay, so I was out front calling out the grievance party and the stupid party, and I mean, like, obviously I was out there criticizing Republicans for that. But even I was surprised that the nerds weren't ready, right? So, like, I was criticizing the jocks and the Trumps, the Cruzes, And there were always, there was the campaign, the entertainment wing, the campaign stuff, the red meat. I mean, like I was criticizing that, but even I assumed that somewhere Paul Ryan and policy staffers and Mike Lee and Price, and that there were the nerds who were holed away somewhere actually working on the details. That's what surprised me. I was ahead of the curve in sort of knowing that the grievance stuff was wrong, but why were our nerds not working on this? That's what surprised me. I naively thought, like, look, Paul Ryan and Price, like, they're gonna have this. Like, that's the miscalculation that Trump made, obviously. Now, unlike me, it was his responsibility like to actually know that, to know better. But I mean, people will. I've been criticized from the left because I wrote that column in January, which was ahead of the curve. I still think Obamacare is bad, and I still think that there could be a free market solution that is much better than either Obamacare or the dog food that Republicans offered up. But I wrote that column because I wanted to find out, like, this is how Republicans are gonna fix healthcare. And I kept talking to these center-right healthcare policy experts for hours, and they couldn't tell me. And it became very clear after doing that work. Now, maybe I should have done that earlier, right? I partly guilty of not seeing it. That doesn't mean that Obamacare is good. See, that's where I think my critics, my friends on the left, are wrong. No. I still don't believe that. But I was surprised that the conservative policy wonks and the nerds did not have a workable, viable alternative. That was a surprise to me.
Well, let me shift gears to the Democratic side of this equation because I want to make you feel good. I know it's not as much of a cool, unruffled demeanor you're giving me. I know a part of you has to be a little sad that something you think is as bad as Obamacare is indestructible.
No, look, I think, it's like, are you upset that Barack Obama won the election? I mean, like, I've dealt with, like, I mean, like, at some point you deal with, like, reality. I mean, I dealt with this in January when I figured out the Republicans weren't, that this was going to be a disaster.
You've gone through the stages of grief much faster than others.
At some point it becomes amusing. I mean, it is a serious. I mean, it's obviously a serious problem, but you get, like, you become inured to things at a certain point, like, because we have to have coping mechanisms to survive in this business.
So one of the reasons why Republicans failed is that Democrats had a united front of resistance. No one in Congress blinked. No one broke ranks. Even though you have 10 Democratic senators from Trump states, not even Joe Manchin broke ranks. So when Trump blames Democrats, it seems sort of silly because Republicans control whole branches of government, but there is some truth to it. If you could have picked off some Democrats from Trump states, you would have had more work with. What's that?
See, that's the other thing. What if? See, I think once they went the reconciliation route, they basically gave those Democrats a pass. They did not. And by the way, let me just disclose. I think I might have done it already. My wife is working for Patrick Morrissey as a consultant. He's running in a primary in West Virginia for the opportunity to run against Joe Manchin for the U.S. Senate. But Republicans could have put people like Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Manchin and Claire McCaskill. They could have potentially put them in a very difficult situation had they done this differently. But because they did it through reconciliation, I think that those Democrats all got a pass. There's no expectation that they should support this.
Well, I think that's part of it, but there's other factors. I mean, there's the fact that Trump is abysmally unpopular, so there's not a lot of pressure from him, even in Trump states, for Democrats to play ball.
He's super popular in West Virginia.
What's that?
I can guarantee you Trump is incredibly popular.
Well, he is, but clearly Joe Manchin didn't feel like he was getting bombarded with phone calls saying, "How dare you not pass Trump care?"
Right, because ironically, it's even though Trump is wildly popular in West Virginia, I would venture to say that the Republican health care repeal and replace is not all that popular.
Right. But beyond that, the bill itself was built to last. And this gets to some stuff that you were talking about before. The unpopular provisions are interwoven with the popular provisions. It was done with input from the health insurance industry and the drug industry and the hospital industry. So when it comes to repeal time, those industries are not all in on repeal. I mean, you had the health insurance lobby drive a stake through the Cruz Amendment at the last minute. The hospital lobby has been running ads against repeal since the spring. So there weren't a lot of stakeholders that were agitating for repeal. And so even though Democrats have, I'm sorry?
So just to back up quick. So the Cruz Amendment would have required insurers to provide ACA compliant plans, but would have allowed them to also have other plans that were not that were that maybe were catastrophic or something that weren't as comprehensive. And why was it that the insurance lobby didn't like that?
Well, they had a letter. I don't want to pretend I know more than I do.
You know a lot. That's why I just sort of cavalierly ask you these sort of on the spot questions.
But what their letter said, if you just give me one second.
All right. Well, while you're pulling that up, let me just say, I think there should be catastrophic plans. So if you're, I understand the whole point about you need young and healthy people to pay money that they don't need, so to cover older, sicker people. But I do think that if you want young people to sign up voluntarily, if there's no mandate, it has to be something that would benefit them. And I do think if you're young, you could maybe pay out of pocket for a doctor's visit. But if you need to insure against a catastrophic loss. What I'm worried about are junk plans that wouldn't be, actually would be the opposite of catastrophic, that you would show up, needing an appendicitis, having with an appendicitis, and you would be stuck with $100,000 hospital bill or something. That's my concern with once you start watering down the required coverage. So anyway, I don't know.
Well, what the health insurance lobby said. This is a letter from AHIP, American Health Insurance Providers, I think is what the acronym stands for, and Blue Cross Blue Shield had also co-signed it. They said it is simply unworkable in any form and would undermine protections for those with pre-existing medical conditions, increase premiums, and lead to widespread terminations of coverage for people currently enrolled in the individual market. By allowing plans alongside those that do not comply with current insurance reforms, mean they're allowed to refuse offering coverage to certain people, would allow the new plans to cherry pick only healthy people from the existing market, making coverage unaffordable for the millions of people who need or want comprehensive coverage. Some have asserted that a single risk pool, which requires insurers to place all consumers into one pool to determine premiums, would make this work. But that's not the case. Establishes a single risk pool and only name only creates two systems of insurance for healthy and sick people. As healthy people move to the less regulated plans, those with significant medical needs would have no choice but to stay in the comprehensive plans, and premiums would skyrocket for people with pre-existing conditions. Finally, this provision will lead to far fewer, if any, coverage options for consumers who purchase their plans in the individual market. As a result, millions of more individuals will become uninsured. So that's the insurance lobby talking.
It seems like there should be a way to do this, but as Donald Trump said, who knew it was this complicated?
But my point is that the original bill, was crafted with their input, with the insurance lobby's input, the drug lobby's input, the hospital industry's input, and there's arguments you can make that the bill lets them get away with a bunch of stuff that you rather they didn't get away with. But
you are America's #1 proponent of government and business colluding.
I'm just telling you what the facts are. Democrats and liberals have wanted universal health care for decades, and only one form has actually passed, and it is this. And this is why it has passed, and this is why it can't be killed, because they are not interested in killing it. So despite that, despite the corporate involvement in the plan, you did not see Democrats divide on this subject. There are plenty of people on the left that think Obamacare is a big sellout to these corporations and are adamant that single payer is the only way to go. They would accept public option as a stepping stone to single payer, but they don't think that in and of itself actually solves the problem. And you have folks on the right side of the Republican Party, the Joe Manchin, et cetera, that don't subscribe to that view, are very sensitive to the complaints they hear about rising premiums in Obamacare and lack of choice of insurers, particularly in certain rural states and markets. Despite those differences, they all came together to save Obamacare. Now, we're now moving into the next phase where people increasingly accept that Obamacare is here to stay, but certain problems still exist. And you have to go beyond opposing and start proposing. And it's easier to unify to oppose. It's much harder to unify when you're proposing. So I think Democrats are heading into a phase where they're not going to be on the same page. Manchin's trying to do this deal with Republicans right now, whereas you had a person from Democracy for America, which is one of the main progressive activist groups in the Netroots mix, saying on the record to McClatchy, single payer is increasingly becoming a litmus test. I mean, he used that word, litmus test. You have not only Bernie Sanders on board that, but now Elizabeth Warren and Kristen Gillibrand, who are likely 2020 candidates, saying the same. People are going to be shamed on the Democratic side if they don't back single payer now and forced to defend themselves. So Democrats might well be in a disunified place on health care very soon, which I would argue fails to learn the lesson of why Obamacare is here to stay, because Democrats put aside those differences to get behind this and didn't treat corporations as the singular obstacle that must be vanquished. They found a way to do a deal with them. And so if you go the single payer route, you don't have that cover from them. You're not going to get all Democrats on board. You may argue this is a singular fight we have to have. We have to have this battle royale to get what's necessary. But be very clear-eyed that you're talking about an extremely uphill battle that's not going to be won with immediate Democratic unity.
Wow. I think there's a lot of I think maybe you should pitch the case against single payer book or something. I think this may have some resonance. I mean, I think this is not an issue that's going to go away.
Well, what's strange to me is that, I mean, on one hand, I totally grasp, and I have a piece that should be coming out in Politico, if not today, hopefully tomorrow, on these points. That healthcare wars never end. I mean, people even talk about how single payer would be a panacea. They still debate healthcare in Canada. They still debate healthcare in the UK. You never stop debating healthcare. There's always a problem somewhere. There's always an imperfection. And it's very personal to people, so it never gets completely deprioritized. So in that respect, I get that we're never going to stop talking about it. But
the other thing we never, this is sort of a little bit of a diversion, but the other thing we never talk about is that, like, maybe it's just too obvious, but this is the product of technology. I mean, this is like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of thing. I mean, once you have, basic sort of needs met, if you're dying at if people are dying at the age of 40 or something, then healthcare, then having like a sophisticated healthcare, regime isn't as important. I mean, we now are at a place where people are living longer, and so this is obviously an area where, I mean, if you're in your 80s, 90s, you're still, there's more demand, I think, obviously, for this to be sophisticated. We've gotten to this point.
Right. So we are going to keep talking about it, forever. But I would have thought that people, the more in the Democratic Party would say, man, this is just one bear of a subject. There's no easy way to tackle healthcare. It has bedeviled every president that's ever tried to do it. Maybe we don't lead on that one. Maybe we don't make, if you're a progressive, why make this the one limit? Why this and not climate? I mean, climate is a situation where we are really behind the eight ball. Maybe you may not be on board with this narrative as a conservative, but clearly on the left, people are like, the time is ticking. The Antarctic ice shelf just cracked off.
If you believe that and you're worried about it, why would you? You just did healthcare. Like, maybe scroll back in 50 years.
I mean, even Bernie-crats, by and large, got behind the project to save Obamacare. I mean, there's a quote from Ben Wickler, who works at MoveOn.org. MoveOn.org went double time to save Obamacare, and Wickler was at the heart of that. But he's quoted McClatchy saying, Democrats need to make a choice between the broken past and the future that can get people to get young activists to actually knock on doors and get it and be enthusiastic. Well, you just got people to knock on doors and make phone calls to save that quote unquote broken past. So it's like they don't get that the ball has been advanced here. Why not consolidate that gain for now and get your shoulder behind the grindstone of some other big issue? I mean, whether it's climate, whether it's jobs or infrastructure, immigration, it's a whole lot of pressing stuff out there. I don't get why this has this hold on folks that if you don't do this, then all is lost.
I envy you because you right now have an insight and a passion about an issue that is, and I think will be for a long time. That's a great place to be if you're someone who does what we do, and you need to write columns and all that.
Well, I think we should wrap things up here. Anything else you need to add?
I interviewed Mike McCurry, the former White House press secretary, who is now a seminary professor, on my podcast, Matt Lewis and the News.
For all our youthful fans, of which there are millions, they might not know the backstory of Mike McCurry.
Well, I mean, I would say he is in my opinion, the best White House press secretary of my lifetime. He was the press secretary during the Clinton scandal years. So I guess it was like Stephanopoulos, and then D.D. Myers, and then Mike McCurry, and then Joe Lockhart. I think that was the progression.
Yeah.
I think McCurry was a terrific spokesman, and then afterwards he also was the co-chair of the Presidential Debate Commission, and now he is at he's at a seminary.
But I think there's two data points I think you left out, unless I misheard. He was the spokesperson during the Lewinsky scandal.
Yes.
And he walked a very awkward line where he purposefully didn't want to know too much and didn't always ask the president what all there was to know, so he would not be put in a position where he had to say something untrue. And he blames himself for the tradition of these televised daily briefings, which had become theater and now the Trump administration seems to be killing it off. So he plays an important role in the history of White House press secretaries.
Oh yeah, right. Although he said, I talked to him about this, and I think he started off. I forget where before he was at the White House, he was like a press secretary for some committee or some cabinet or whatever. But and they televised it, so he thought, well, why not? We could televise it for the White House too. But back then it wasn't broadcast live. So even though he is sort of blamed for that, it was not broadcast live. I guess that came later. Now what pisses me off is the technical issues, which I've struggled with being a sort of do-it-yourself podcaster all these years. And but Mike McCurry and I had a great conversation mostly about the intersection of faith and politics, because I think, having been a spinmeister for all those years, he came to the conclusion that he wanted to then do something that did not require you to take a shower after coming up behind the podium, and he wanted to find sort of something that had purpose and meaning, and so he's very now it's religion. And we had a really cool conversation about that. He said some things that I think a lot of liberals would be surprised by, coming from a fellow liberal who happens to be a Christian as well. But this new iPhone 7 bill, I don't like the fact that the earphone jack, you can't like charge your phone and have your earphones in. And I was doing it on Skype via my iPhone, as I do when I'm on the road, and I didn't realize it had this microphone built into it. So this great conversation with Mike McCurry, every once in a while there's like a sound as the microphone like rubs up against my shirt. I always threaten to quit podcasting because of things like this, but anyway,
this is why Trump won, because people like you who don't make anything, don't produce anything, don't contribute to society, don't work with your hands, you get all teary-eyed because your podcast audio is not flawless.
Hey, ever since I saw John Cusack in Say Anything, my motto has been, I don't want to make anything, I don't want to produce anything. That's where I'm at. But anyway, check it out. I think the conversation is worth enduring that annoyance. It's Matt Lewis and the News podcast, Mike McCurry. Do check that out.
If you haven't seen, check out my response to David Brooks in Real Clear Politics, the college educator not ruining America. And hopefully in the next day or two, my take on the healthcare debacle in Politico should be publishing in the near future.
And stay tuned for my forthcoming rant to Apple about the earphones. I'm going to go all Ann Coulter on them.
That is the way to make it in this business.
Right. That's a whole discussion. Should people who are prominent and have a perch use Twitter to criticize companies that give them bad service? That is, on one hand, you're bringing attention. You have a platform, and you have the ability to call out an airline that may be screwing over a lot of other Americans who don't have the platform. On the other hand, and by the way, I've done it. I'm guilty of this. I'm going to cop to this. But on the other hand, like, it could be anecdotal, and is it appropriate? Is it ethically appropriate to use your perch to call out a company that happened to give you poor service, and from your perspective? Maybe we delve into that in the future.
It's a teaser, cliffhanger.
That's a think piece, my friend. All right.
Till next week, sir.
Yeah, check us out at DMZ Show on Twitter, and we'll see you back here in the DMZ next week.
All right, take care.